He was on your medication for 8 months. Tremzaprine. It worked. He could hold a coffee cup again. He could walk to church without falling. She paused, watching the billionaire's face drain of color. It costs $2,400 a month. He stopped taking it. He told my mother the side effects were too bad. He lied to protect her from the guilt. He died in January, 3 years ago. I found him in his chair by the window. He was finally still. The silence in that study could have crushed bones. I came here to hate you, Dominic. I came to look into the eyes of the man who signed off on that price and see if there was a human being there. I stayed because I couldn't hate you, and I couldn't forgive you either. I don't know what this is. What would you do if the person you blamed for destroying your family turned out to be the person who might save your soul? What would you do if the monster you came to destroy was already dying from the inside out, and your hatred felt like kicking a corpse? Dominic Ashford built a $47 billion pharmaceutical empire. He testified before Congress. He graced the covers of Forbes and Vanity Fair. He was called the conscience of an industry that had none. And 18 months before Mira Castellano walked into his life, 17 patients died in his clinical trial. 17 families buried people who trusted him. And something inside Dominic Ashford broke so completely that all the money in the world could not put it back together. She was supposed to be his cure. A wellness companion. A grounding presence from a world he had never seen. She came to find a monster. What she found was a man so hollow that hatred felt pointless. And what happened between them, the confession, the gala, the wild night that exposed everything, the betrayal that neither of them saw coming. That is the story I am about to tell you. But I need you to understand something first. This is not a fairy tale. This is not a story where love fixes everything and the credits roll on a perfect ending. This is a story about what happens when two wounded people stop pretending and start telling the truth. About whether redemption is possible for those who have caused harm they can never undo. About whether love born in deception can survive when the lights come on. If you have ever carried guilt that felt heavier than your bones. If you have ever loved someone you were supposed to hate. If you have ever wondered whether the person you have been pretending to be could ever meet the person you actually are, then stay with me. This story will break your heart before it puts it back together. And the answers it offers might not be what you expect. Before we go any further, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This is one of our longest stories yet, and I promise you, you will not want to miss a single moment. And if you are new here, welcome to the Isle of Secrets. This is the channel where power meets passion, and redemption is always worth the fight. We tell stories about the men and women who run empires, build fortunes, and lose themselves along the way. Stories about CEOs and executives who discover that the boardroom cannot teach you how to love, and that sometimes the person who saves you is the one you never saw coming. Every week, we bring you a new journey filled with romance, betrayal, impossible choices, and the kind of transformation that changes everything. These are not fairy tales. These are stories about real human struggle, real consequences, and real redemption. So if you love drama that makes you think, romance that makes you feel, and twists that you never see coming, you are in the right place. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Now let me take you back to the beginning. To a brownstone in Beacon Hill. To a man who had everything and nothing at all. The grandfather clock in Dominic Ashford's hallway had been ticking for 93 years. It had belonged to his grandmother, then his mother. And now it marked the hours of a house where no one laughed, no one argued, and no one stayed longer than their shift required. The sound of that clock was the first thing Dominic heard every morning, and the last thing he heard every night. In between, there was silence. Expensive, suffocating, perfectly maintained silence. He stood at his bathroom mirror at 5:47 in the morning, watching his hands tremble as he reached for his medication. The light was cold and gray, filtering through windows that cost more than most cars. 17 pills in a plastic organizer, 17 compartments. He had stopped believing in coincidence 18 months ago. The face looking back at him was the face of a stranger wearing his features. Silver at the temples, jaw still square, though the flesh beneath it had begun to sag with exhaustion and neglect. Eyes that photographers once called piercing now looked like windows into empty rooms. 44 years old, $47 billion, 17 deaths. The arithmetic of his life had become very simple. Mrs. Brennan had set breakfast in the small dining room, as she did every morning. Fresh fruit arranged with geometric precision. Egg whites prepared exactly as he preferred them. Coffee in a cup that cost more than her weekly grocery bill. The Boston Globe folded beside his plate, though he had stopped reading newspapers months ago. The headlines either mentioned Viridian Therapeutics or they did not. And either way, they made his chest tight and his hands shake. "Good morning, Mr. Ashford." Her voice was warm, professional, carefully calibrated after 20 years of service to express concern without intrusion. "Good morning, Mrs. Brennan." The same exchange. Every morning. A ritual that meant nothing and sustained everything. The predictability was the only thing holding his days together. She retreated to the kitchen. He sat alone at a table meant for 12, eating food he could not taste, watching morning light crawl across hardwood floors that had not felt a child's footsteps in over a decade. His children had grown up in this house, and now they communicated through lawyers. His wife had left 2 years ago, and now she was someone else's wife in San Francisco. The silence pressed against him like deep water. His phone buzzed on the table. His lawyer, Nathaniel Cross. His physician, Dr. Raymond Carr. His board member, Marcus Webb, wanting to discuss quarterly projections. He silenced them all. The clinical trial had ended 18 months ago. The FDA investigation had concluded 6 months after that. Viridian Therapeutics was cleared of criminal negligence. The contaminated batch had come from a third-party manufacturer with an impeccable safety record. The accelerated timeline Dominic had personally approved was deemed within acceptable parameters. Acceptable parameters. 17 people dead. Acceptable. The word tasted like copper in his mouth. Like blood. Like the truth he could not swallow no matter how many pills he took. He had shaken hands with those families. He had looked into the eyes of husbands and wives and children and promised them that Viridian's Alzheimer's treatment would give their loved ones more time, more clarity, more moments worth remembering. Instead, he had given them brain hemorrhages, seizures in the night, phone calls from hospitals where the only mercy was that it had been quick. The stress had triggered something in him. His doctors called it an autoimmune response. His body attacking its own nervous system, like it knew he deserved to suffer. Numbness in his fingertips that came and went without warning. Crushing panic attacks that left him gasping on bathroom floors, certain he was dying, almost hoping he was. Periods of emotional flatness, where he could not cry, could not laugh, could not remember why he had built any of this in the first place. His wife had left 2 years ago. Victoria, she had tried, in her way. Therapists and retreats and conversations that went in circles until they both got dizzy. In the end, she had said something that still echoed in his empty rooms. "I cannot watch you disappear, Dominic. I will not. She was in San Francisco now, remarried to a tech entrepreneur who probably laughed at dinner and touched her hand when she spoke and did all the things Dominic had forgotten how to do. He had seen photographs in a magazine. She looked happy. She looked alive. She looked like someone he used to know. His son, Alexander, ran a sustainable wine venture in Napa Valley. His daughter, Isabel, worked for a nonprofit in Seattle. They communicated through lawyers regarding trust fund disbursements. Birthday cards arrived with pre-printed signatures. He was not estranged from his children. He was simply irrelevant to them. And so the grandfather clock ticked, and the silence grew. And Dominic Ashford, founder and chairman of Viridian Therapeutics, one of the most powerful men in American pharmaceutical history, sat alone at his breakfast table and wondered if anyone would notice if he simply stopped existing. The appointment with Dr. Raymond Carr was at 10 o'clock. Dominic arrived at 9:45 because punctuality was one of the few disciplines he still maintained. Control what you can control. His father used to say that, usually while drunk, usually before throwing something. Carr's office was on Newbury Street, a discreet brownstone with no signage indicating the famous names that climbed its stairs. Privacy was the product here, as much as medicine. The waiting room was empty, as it always was for Dominic's appointments. He paid extra for the privilege of not being seen. The doctor was 62 years old, with the weathered patience of a man who had spent 4 decades listening to people who could buy anything except health. He looked at Dominic's latest blood work with an expression that Dominic had learned to read over the years. Concern masked by professionalism. Bad news wrapped in careful phrasing. The medications are not working as well as we had hoped. They never do. Carr set down the file and removed his reading glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose in a gesture that Dominic recognized as frustration, barely contained. Dominic, I have been treating you for 3 years. In that time, I have watched a man I respect deteriorate in ways that medication cannot address. The autoimmune symptoms are real. The anxiety is real. But there is something underneath both of them that we are not reaching. Something that pills cannot touch. Dominic's jaw tightened. If you are going to recommend another therapist, save your breath. I have seen 6 of them. I have talked until my voice was hoarse. Nothing changes. I am going to recommend something different. Carr slid a brochure across the desk. Glossy paper. The Ashford Foundation logo in the corner. Dominic recognized it immediately. His mother's name was on that logo. Her memory was supposed to mean something. Your foundation launched a new initiative 6 months ago. The Holistic Healing Fellowship. It pairs scholarship recipients with recovering executives as what they call wellness companions. Dominic stared at the brochure without touching it. I am aware of the program. I approved the funding. I did not think it applied to me. Then you know the theory. Authentic human connection as a therapeutic modality. People from outside your world, with no corporate agenda, no social ambition. Their job is to help participants reconnect with ordinary human rhythms. Conversation, walking, cooking, the small dignities of time that is not monetized. Dominic's voice was flat. You want me to pay someone to pretend to like me? Carr leaned forward, his eyes intent. You are already paying everyone to pretend, Dominic. Your housekeeper, your lawyers, your board members. Everyone in your life is on a payroll, and everyone performs accordingly. What I am suggesting is someone who does not need your money. Someone who has nothing to gain from your approval and nothing to lose from your displeasure. What makes you think that person exists? Carr smiled. And it was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a doctor who had run out of conventional options. That is exactly the problem. Is it not? You have surrounded yourself with people who need you. and you have forgotten what it feels like to be with someone who does not. The fellowship matching process took 2 weeks. Dominic received a file containing the biography of his assigned wellness companion. Her name was Mira Castellano, 26 years old, third-year medical student at Boston University, first-generation college student from New Bedford, Massachusetts, recipient of the Ashford Foundation Scholarship, which covered her full tuition and living expenses. The file included a photograph, dark hair falling past her shoulders, serious eyes that seemed to look through the camera rather than at it, a face that seemed to be assessing rather than posing. Her father had been a fisherman. Her mother still worked at a processing plant. She had graduated first in her high school class and earned her undergraduate degree in biology with highest honors. She was poor. Everything Dominic had once been, before the money had built walls around him so high he could no longer see over them. He approved the match. The first session was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon in late October. The leaves in Boston had turned to fire and gold. But Dominic noticed none of it. He had stopped noticing beauty somewhere around the 5th funeral. Mira arrived at the brownstone at precisely 4 o'clock. Mrs. Brennan opened the door and escorted her to the study, where Dominic waited behind his desk. He had positioned himself intentionally, the way he positioned himself for board meetings and investor calls. The desk between them, the chair for her slightly lower than his, the body language of power, deployed without conscious thought because it was all he knew how to do. She entered the room and stopped. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Dominic had prepared for this. He had words ready. The gracious host, the grateful participant, the appropriate phrases for a man meeting his wellness companion for the first time. He had rehearsed them the way he rehearsed everything, because spontaneity felt too much like vulnerability. But something in her expression stopped him. She was not intimidated. She was not impressed. She was looking at him the way his doctors looked at scan results. Clinical. Assessing. Searching for pathology beneath the surface. Miss Castellano, please, sit down. She sat. She did not thank him for the opportunity. She did not comment on the beauty of his home or the honor of being selected for the fellowship. She simply waited. The silence stretched. Dominic found himself shifting in his chair, something he had not done in a business meeting in 20 years. The program guidelines indicate that our sessions should focus on grounding activities. Her voice was level when she finally spoke, with just a trace of coastal Massachusetts in the vowels. The accent of fishing towns and factory floors. Is that what you want? He blinked. Excuse me. Is that what you want, Mr. Ashford? The program guidelines. The grounding activities. Or is that what you think you are supposed to want? He felt the first flicker of something that might have been irritation, or might have been interest. He could not tell the difference anymore. I am not certain I understand the distinction. Most people do not. She crossed her legs, settled into the chair as if she had every right to be there, as if his money and his name and his $47 billion empire meant nothing in this room, as if she could see right through the performance to the emptiness underneath. The program matched us because I am supposed to be a grounding presence. Someone without corporate agenda or social ambition. Someone to help you reconnect with ordinary human rhythms. Those are the program guidelines. They are also nonsense. He stared at her. You applied for this fellowship. I applied for a scholarship. This fellowship was additional, and I applied for it because I wanted to meet you. Why? Her eyes met his. Held them. Did not flinch. I wanted to understand how someone could watch people die because they could not afford medicine, sign off on the price, and then sleep at night. The silence that followed could have shattered glass. Dominic's hand trembled where it rested on the desk. He pressed it flat, controlled the shake, controlled everything he had been trained to control since he was a child, trying to survive his father's rages. He should have ended the session. Should have called Mrs. Brennan. Should have had his lawyer contact the foundation and demand a different companion. Someone who knew their place. Someone who would play the role they were assigned. Instead, he asked a question. "And did you find your answer?" Something shifted in her face. Something that might have been surprise. Might have been respect. C. Kaiser. And Kludera. Might have been respect. Might have been the first honest moment either of them had experienced in longer than they could remember. Not yet. But I am starting to. She stood. Same time next week, Mr. Ashford. She left before he could respond. For the first time in 18 months, Dominic Ashford had met someone who wanted nothing from him, and he had no idea what to do with that. Right now, you might be wondering why she stayed, why she walked into that room looking for a monster and left making another appointment. If you have ever met someone who made you question everything you thought you knew about them, about yourself, about the distance between who we pretend to be and who we actually are, then you already understand. Before we continue, drop a comment below. Do you think Mira was right to confront him like that? Or should she have played along with the program guidelines? Let me know what you think. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that button now, because what comes next changes everything. The next session was easier. Not easy, but easier. They circled each other with words. She asked questions that his publicists would have vetoed. He gave answers that his lawyers would have redacted. She did not perform gratitude for the scholarship that paid her tuition. She did not praise his philanthropy or his corporate ethics or his congressional testimony. She simply sat across from him and refused to pretend. By the third week, something had begun to shift. Tell me about the clinical trial. Her voice was steady. Not accusatory. Not sympathetic. Just asking. The way you might ask someone to describe the weather on a day they would rather forget. The clinical trial was for an Alzheimer's treatment. A drug that showed remarkable promise in early testing. It could slow cognitive decline by as much as 60%. It could give patients years of clarity that the disease typically steals. He paused. The memories were so close to the surface now. He could see their faces. But development was slow. Years of research, billions in investment, and the families waiting, watching their loved ones disappear, begging for any hope at all. So you accelerated the timeline. Dominic stared at the fireplace. The flames had died to embers, casting the room in orange shadows. I approved an accelerated Phase 3 trial. The data supported it. The FDA agreed. We had every reason to believe it was safe. But it was not. No, it was not. The words felt like stones in his mouth. A third-party manufacturer provided a contaminated batch. The contamination interacted with the active compounds in ways no one predicted. 17 patients developed fatal brain hemorrhages within the first 6 weeks of the expanded trial. His hands were shaking. He could not stop them. I signed off on that timeline. I approved that manufacturer. I shook hands with those families and promised them hope. She did not respond immediately. When she did, her voice was softer than he had heard it before. Did you know about the contamination? No. Could you have known? He closed his eyes. I do not know. That is the question that wakes me at 3 in the morning, every night, for 18 months. Could I have caught it? Should I have demanded more testing? Was I so focused on the promise that I ignored the risk? And the FDA cleared you. He laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. The FDA cleared the company. The official finding was that Viridian followed all protocols, And the contamination was not foreseeable. We were exonerated. But you do not feel exonerated. He looked at her finally. Really looked. Would you? She held his gaze for a long moment. No. I would not. The session was supposed to end at 5 o'clock. It was nearly 7 when Mrs. Brennan knocked hesitantly on the study door, asking if Miss Castellano would be staying for dinner. She declined. But at the door, she paused. The evening light caught her face, and for a moment, she looked older than her years. Older and sadder, and carrying something heavy. Mr. Ashford. Yes. The monster I came looking for. I am starting to think he does not exist. She was gone before he could respond. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Dominic suffered the worst panic attack of his adult life. It happened without warning. A news segment playing in the background. Some 24-hour channel Mrs. Brennan had left on in the kitchen while she prepared dinner. The family of Marcus Whitfield, one of 17 patients who died in Viridian Therapeutics' failed Alzheimer's trial, announced today that they will be filing a wrongful death lawsuit against the pharmaceutical giant. He heard the name before he processed the words. Marcus Whitfield, 64 years old, retired school teacher. 2 grandchildren who had been in the room when Dominic shook his hand and promised the drug would give him more time with them. More birthdays. More Christmases. More ordinary moments that become precious only when you know they are numbered. The room tilted. His vision narrowed to a point. His heart was racing, then stopping, then racing again. He could not breathe. He could not think. He was on the floor. When had he fallen? His back was against the cold stone of the kitchen wall. His knees were drawn to his chest. His hands were clawed in his hair. The sound coming from his throat was not human. It was the sound of a wounded animal. And then she was there. Mira. He did not know when she had arrived. Did not know how she had gotten in. Did not care. She was on the floor beside him. Not touching. Not yet. Just present. A voice in the darkness. Dominic. I need you to listen to my voice. Can you hear me? He could not respond, could not make his mouth form words. That is okay. You do not need to talk. Just listen. Her voice was steady, calm. The voice of someone who had done this before. I am going to tell you about my father. His name was Manuel. He was a fisherman in New Bedford. Worked the scallop boats until his hands curled up from arthritis, and he could not grip the nets anymore. Dominic's breath was still ragged, but something about her voice was anchoring him. Something about the rhythm of her words. When the tremors started, we thought it was the cold. New Bedford winters are brutal. The kind of cold that gets into your bones and never really leaves. But it was not the cold. It was Parkinson's. She shifted slightly. Closer. Not touching, but close enough that he could feel her presence. The medication helped. For a while, he could hold a coffee cup again. Could walk to church on Sunday without falling. Could hold my mother's hand without shaking. Her voice caught almost imperceptibly. But the medication cost $2,400 a month. Even with insurance, even with the assistance programs we applied for and were denied, $2,400 we did not have. Dominic's breathing was slowing. The tunnel of his vision was beginning to widen. He stopped taking his pills in September. Told my mother the side effects were too bad, that he felt better without them. He was lying. He knew the truth. He knew he was choosing to die, so we would not have to choose between his medicine and our rent. She was quiet for a moment. He died in January. I found him in his chair by the window, looking out at the harbor where he used to work. He was finally still. The panic attack was receding. Dominic could feel his heart settling into something closer to a normal rhythm. His voice came out as a rasp. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you are not the only one who carries the dead." He turned his head to look at her. Her face was composed, but her eyes were bright with tears she would not shed. "You should have called 911. Called Mrs. Brennan. Called anyone but sat here with me on this floor." She shook her head. "You did not need medical intervention. You needed someone to stay." "Why did you stay?" She was quiet for a long moment. "Because you would have done the same for me." He laughed. It was weak. Hollow. "You do not know that." "No. But I believe it anyway." After the panic attack, something shifted between them. Dominic could not name it, could not quantify it, could not enter it into a spreadsheet or present it to a board of directors. But it was there. Their sessions grew longer. The formal distance of companion and participant gave way to something that looked dangerously like friendship. She started calling him Dominic instead of Mr. Ashford. He started asking about her day, her studies, her life outside his empty rooms. She brought him to New Bedford on a gray November afternoon. The town smelled like salt and diesel and the particular decay of a fishing industry in decline. Weathered boats rocked in the harbor, their paint chipped, their rigging singing in the wind. Nets dried on docks that had seen better decades. Portuguese was spoken in rapid-fire bursts by old men who looked at Dominic's cashmere coat with expressions that fell somewhere between amusement and contempt. "You are staring." Mira's voice broke through his observation. "I have never been anywhere like this." She laughed. It was a genuine sound, full of a warmth he had not heard from her before. "You have been everywhere. Private jets to Tokyo. Villas in Tuscany. That ski chalet in Gstaad I read about in your Forbes profile. I have been to expensive places. That is not the same thing." The fish market was brutal and honest. Men with weathered hands and missing fingers from accidents with equipment hauled crates of ice and scales. Women sorted the catch with a speed that spoke of decades of practice. The smell was overwhelming. A fisherman in his 60s approached them. His face was sun-damaged leather. His eyes assessed Dominic the way Dominic's board assessed quarterly losses. "This the rich one, Mira. This is my friend Dominic." The fisherman snorted. "Friend, right." He extended a hand. Dominic shook it. The grip was crushing. Those. I am Jorge. Worked with Manuel on the boats. 30 years before his hands went. Dominic did not know what to say. "I am sorry for your loss." Jorge's eyes narrowed. "You know anything about scallop fishing, rich man?" "No." 16 hours on the water. Ice in your bones. Nets that will take your fingers if you lose focus for a second. All for catch prices that the processors set, and we have no power to negotiate. You know what that feels like." Dominic shook his head. "No, I do not." Something in Jorge's expression shifted. Not friendlier, but less hostile. "At least you are honest about it." He walked away. Mira watched him go with a sad smile. "He loved my father. They all did." The bakery was a revelation. It was called Rosa's, after Mira's grandmother. The current Rosa, Mira's mother, was a small woman with Mira's serious eyes and hands dusted with flour. The warmth of the place hit Dominic the moment he stepped through the door. The smell of cinnamon and sugar and fresh bread. Rosa looked at Dominic for a long moment when Mira introduced them. "You are him." It was not a question. "Mama." Rosa held up a hand. "I read the newspapers. I know who pays for your school. I know what company made the pills your father could not afford." The silence stretched. Dominic waited for the accusation, the condemnation, the explosion of grief and rage that he probably deserved. Instead, Rosa gestured to a small table by the window. "Sit. You will have pastéis de nata and coffee. Then we will talk. The pastries were the best thing Dominic had tasted in years. Sweet custard and flaky pastry, dusted with cinnamon and powdered sugar. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint, served in small cups that Rosa refilled without asking. Rosa watched him eat without speaking. My husband died because we could not afford medicine. Dominic met her eyes. I know. I am more sorry than I can express. Rosa shook her head. I am not telling you for an apology. I am telling you because my daughter is sitting in your fancy house every week, and I need to know if you understand what that means. What does it mean? It means she is choosing to be there. Mira does not do anything she does not choose. She came to you angry. She is still here. That tells me something about you, that the newspapers never will. What does it tell you? Rosa smiled. It was Mira's smile, decades older. That maybe you are worth the trouble. The drive back to Boston was quiet. Night had fallen. The highway stretched ahead of them, headlights illuminating a few hundred feet of asphalt. At a time. Thank you for taking me there. Mira kept her eyes on the road. You needed to see it. Why? Because my world is as real as yours. The people in that fish market, my mother in her bakery, Jorge and the boats and the cold that gets into your bones. That is real. Your boardrooms and your stock prices and your press conferences, those are real too. But you had forgotten that both realities exist in the same country, the same city, sometimes the same body. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. I grew up poor. Did you know that? She glanced at him. I did not. My father was an alcoholic, a mean drunk. He worked construction when he could stay sober long enough to hold a hammer. My mother cleaned houses for people who looked at her the way your Jorge looked at me today. Your mother, the one the foundation is named for, Eleanor Ashford. She died when I was 24, a rare form of cancer that metastasized before anyone caught it. Mira's voice softened. I am sorry. The irony is that Viridian was already developing treatments for that kind of cancer. We were years away from approval, but we were working on it. I used to lie awake at night thinking that if we had just moved faster, if I had pushed harder, maybe I could have saved her. And now you push harder on everything. Yes, and sometimes people die because of it. The words hung in the air between them. You did not kill those 17 patients, Dominic. He stared out the window at the darkness. Tell that to Marcus Whitfield's grandchildren. I would, if I could. I would tell them that the man who signed off on that timeline was trying to give their grandfather more time, that he was haunted by his own mother's death and desperate to spare other families the same grief, that he was not a monster, even if the outcome was monstrous. You do not know that. I know what I have seen. I came looking for a monster. I found a man. He turned to look at her. What does that make you? She smiled, but there was something sad in it. I do not know yet. I am still figuring that out. Meanwhile, in a glass tower overlooking the Charles River, Theodore Blackwood was making plans. Teddy, as his friends called him, had been in the business of money longer than most of his colleagues had been alive. 70 years on this earth. 50 of them spent identifying weakness and exploiting it for profit. He sat in his corner office, ice clinking in an old-fashioned glass, watching the sunset paint the water gold and red. The view had cost him $12 million. The view was worth every penny. He had funded Viridian's original seed round when Dominic Ashford was a hungry young scientist with a revolutionary idea and no idea how to monetize it. He had guided Dominic through early clinical trials, through the FDA approval process, through an IPO that made them both rich beyond imagination. He had also watched Dominic develop a conscience. That had been a problem. Conscience made people unpredictable. Conscience made them testify before Congress about drug pricing. Conscience made them slash insulin costs and sacrifice shareholder value for something as nebulous as the public good. Conscience was a luxury that cost money, and Dominic's conscience had become very expensive indeed. "Mr. Blackwood, I have the report you requested." His assistant placed a folder on the desk. Inside were photographs. A woman entering the Beacon Hill brownstone. The same woman exiting. Hours later. Repeat. 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 Teddy smiled. "Tell me about the girl." "Her name is Mira Castellano. Third-year medical student at Boston University. Ashford Foundation scholarship recipient. She is assigned to the Holistic Healing Fellowship. Officially, she is his wellness companion. And unofficially." The assistant shifted uncomfortably. "Visits are becoming longer, more frequent. There are no other companions assigned to him. Their relationship appears to be exclusive." Teddy leaned back in his chair. Exclusive. What an interesting word. Shall I continue monitoring? Teddy studied the photograph. The woman was pretty enough. Young. Clearly from modest means. Everything Dominic's ex-wife, Victoria, was not. Perfect. Yes. Continue monitoring and begin compiling background. I want to know everything about Miss Castellano. Her family, her finances, her vulnerabilities. What are you looking for, sir? Teddy smiled. It did not reach his eyes. Leverage. The blind item appeared 3 weeks later. Which troubled pharma prince is finding comfort in the arms of a student young enough to be his daughter? Insiders whisper that his wellness program has very personal benefits. Dominic saw it over breakfast. Mrs. Brennan had left the society pages where they would not be missed. His first call was to Nathaniel Cross. Deny everything. Threaten litigation if they name names. His second call was to Mira. I need to see you. She arrived within the hour. Her face was pale. She had seen the item too. I am sorry. She stared at him. You are sorry. For what? For exposing you to this. For whatever scrutiny is about to come your way. For the fact that your name will inevitably be attached to mine in ways that will follow you for years. Mira sat down across from him. Her jaw was set in a way he was beginning to recognize. The look she got when she was about to refuse to be reasonable. Dominic. I applied for a scholarship from one of the most controversial pharmaceutical companies in America. I accepted an assignment that put me in the private home of a scandal-plagued CEO. I knew exactly what risks I was taking. But this, the implications, your reputation. My reputation is that I am a poor student from a fishing town who is trying to become a doctor. Nothing that happens in the society pages will change that. The people who matter to me already know who I am. He was quiet for a moment. The foundation will want to investigate. To make sure there is no impropriety. Let them investigate. They will ask invasive questions. Let them ask. Mira. She leaned forward. I came here to hate you. I stayed because I found something I did not expect. I am not going to let anonymous gossip chase me away from something that matters. Something that matters. For the first time, something flickered in her expression. Vulnerability. Uncertainty. You matter, Dominic. What is happening between us matters. I do not fully understand it yet. But I know I am not willing to walk away from it. Because some society columnist needs content. He stared at her. What is happening between us? She held his gaze. I do not know. But I think we owe it to ourselves to find out. The foundation investigation was exactly as humiliating as Dominic had feared. Mira was called before a panel of 7 board members, all of them wealthy, all of them skeptical, all of them looking at her as though she were something that had crawled out of a drain. Miss Castellano, can you describe the nature of your sessions with Mr. Ashford? Conversation. Walking. Occasionally, cooking. The activities outlined in the fellowship program guidelines. And these sessions, they take place exclusively at Mr. Ashford's private residence. That is correct. At night. Often in the evening. Yes. My class schedule during the day is demanding. The questioner, a woman in her 60s with diamonds at her throat and judgment in her eyes, leaned forward. And what exactly do you and Mr. Ashford discuss during these evening sessions? Mira's voice did not waver. His childhood, his mother, the clinical trial and its aftermath, his fears, his guilt, the things that wake him at 3 a.m. and will not let him sleep. The panel exchanged glances. That seems unusually intimate for a wellness companion relationship. The program is designed to facilitate authentic connection. Authenticity requires intimacy. Some might say it requires too much intimacy. Mira met the woman's eyes. Some might say that wealthy people have forgotten what authentic connection looks like, that they surround themselves with employees and sycophants, and confuse purchased presents for genuine relationship. That when someone finally treats them like a human being instead of an asset class, they do not know how to categorize the experience. The room went very quiet. Mira continued, I have done nothing improper. Neither has Mr. Ashford. If you find evidence to the contrary, please present it. Otherwise, I would suggest that the board focus its attention on the Foundation's mission rather than the personal lives of its scholarship recipients. She stood. I trust my scholarship will continue. I have earned it. She left before anyone could respond. The investigation found no evidence of impropriety, but the damage was already done. The gossip had taken on a life of its own. Dominic's face appeared on cable news, paired with speculation about his mental state and his personal life. Mira's photograph was plastered across social media, dissected and analyzed by strangers who knew nothing about her but felt entitled to judge everything. And in his glass tower, Teddy Blackwood watched it all with satisfaction. The groundwork was laid. Now it was time to spring the trap. She had come to hate him. She stayed because she found something she could not name. And the gala was about to test everything they had built. What happens when private transformation is forced into public spectacle? What happens when the people who want to destroy you also hold the power to expose you? Stay with me, because the wild night is coming, and neither of them is ready for what happens next. The gala was scheduled for a Saturday evening in December. Viridian Therapeutics' 25th anniversary celebration, held at the Boston Public Library. $50,000 per plate. Governors and senators in attendance. The kind of wealth that never had to ask prices. Teddy made his move 3 days before the event. If you attend the gala alone, looking diminished, I cannot guarantee the board will not call a vote on your chairmanship. Dominic stared at his old mentor across the desk. Is that a threat? Teddy smiled. It is information. The board is nervous. The stock has not recovered since the trial news. Your public appearances have been minimal. There are whispers that you are not fit to lead. And attending the gala will solve this. Attending the gala with strength and stability will solve this. Prove you are still the man who built this company. Smile. Shake hands. Remind them why they invested in you. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. I will attend. Excellent. And I will not attend alone. Teddy's smile froze slightly. Victoria is remarried. I hardly think. Not Victoria. Mira. Teddy's expression flickered. Something dark moved behind his eyes, quickly concealed. The scholarship student. The woman who has done more to help me in 6 months than a decade of therapy and medication. Yes. Dominic. I hardly think that is wise. Given the current gossip. Dominic stood. I stopped caring about gossip the night I signed off on 17 deaths. I will bring Mira to the gala, and the board will see exactly who I have become. For a moment, Teddy's mask slipped. The predator underneath was visible, calculating, adjusting. Then the smile returned. As you wish, Dominic. I look forward to meeting her properly. Dominic left the office without looking back. He did not see Teddy reach for his phone. Did not hear the instruction to the voice on the other end. Make sure the photographer knows exactly where to be. The dress arrived 3 days before the gala. Mira had not asked for one. Had not expected one. But the box appeared at her apartment door with a simple card. For Saturday. Please accept this. It is the least I can offer. The dress was deep burgundy. Not couture, but elegant. Clearly chosen by someone who understood that she would never accept something extravagant. Something she could not have plausibly borrowed. She turned it over in her hands, feeling the weight of the fabric, feeling the weight of what Saturday meant. Her mother's voice crackled through the phone. You know what you are walking into. I know who I am walking in with. Rosa was quiet for a moment. Your father would have things to say about this. Mira smiled despite herself. He would. But he would also understand. What would he understand? That some things are worth the trouble, and some people are worth the risk. Rosa sighed. You are so much like him. Stubborn, foolish, brave. I learned from the best. On the other end of the line, Rosa laughed softly. Come home for Christmas. And bring your rich man if you want. I will cook. He is not my... She stopped. I do not know what he is, Mama. But I will bring him if he wants to come. He will want to. How do you know? Because you are my daughter, and anyone with eyes can see you are worth wanting. On the evening of the gala, Dominic stood before his mirror and saw a stranger. The man looking back at him wore a tuxedo that cost more than most people earned in a month. His silver-templed hair was perfectly styled. His jaw was set in an expression of confidence he did not feel. The man in the mirror was the man he had been performing for 20 years. The man in the mirror was a lie. He had spent the afternoon with his physician, adjusting medications, preparing for the stress the evening would bring. He had reviewed talking points with his publicist. He had practiced answers to questions about the clinical trial, the stock price, the future of the company. He had not prepared for the question that actually mattered. Who was he going to be tonight? The chairman fighting to keep his seat? Or the man who had been broken open, who had found something worth protecting in the most unexpected place, who was walking into that ballroom with someone who saw him for who he really was? He did not know. Maybe that was the point. Maybe all transformation begins in uncertainty. Mira arrived at the brownstone at 6:30. Mrs. Brennan opened the door, and her face softened into something that looked almost like maternal pride. Miss Castellano. You look beautiful. Thank you, Mrs. Brennan. Dominic was in the study. When he turned to see her in the doorway, something in his expression shifted. The dress fit perfectly. It was elegant without being ostentatious. The deep burgundy brought out the warmth in her dark hair, the seriousness in her eyes. She did not look like a scholarship student. She did not look like a companion. She looked like someone who had every right to be wherever she wanted to be. You are stunning. She smiled, but there was nervousness underneath it. I am terrified. He crossed the room to her. We do not have to do this. We can stay here. Watch terrible movies. Order takeout. Let the board think whatever they want. She shook her head. No. You need to face them. And I need to be there with you. Why? She met his eyes. Because you matter. Because what is happening between us matters. Because I am done hiding from things that scare me. He reached out, took her hand, felt the slight tremor in her fingers that matched the tremor in his. Together. Then, together. What you have just witnessed is the calm before the storm. Two wounded people, finally admitting that what they have found in each other is worth fighting for. A predator, laying his trap. And a night that is about to change everything. Do you think the truth about Teddy Blackwood's betrayal will finally surface? And Dominic Ashford will have to make a choice that will define the rest of his life? But I want to hear from you first. In the comments below, tell me what moment hit you the hardest so far. Was it Mira's story about her father on the kitchen floor? Was it Rosa's acceptance in the bakery? Was it Dominic finally admitting that Mira matters to him? Let me know. And if you are not subscribed yet, now is the moment. Hit that button. Turn on notifications. I am from the Isle of Secrets. Stay with me. The wild night is just beginning. The Boston Public Library had been transformed into a temple of wealth. 10,000 candles flickered in crystal holders. Flowers cascaded from every surface, carefully chosen to complement the burgundy and gold color scheme. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the main hall, their music drifting beneath the murmur of conversations worth millions. The attendees were the kind of people who measured their worth in zeros. Governors, senators, hedge fund managers, pharmaceutical executives. The kind of people who attended $50,000 dinners because anything less expensive would be embarrassing. And in the midst of all of it, Mira Castellano walked through the receiving line on the arm of Dominic Ashford. The whispers began before she reached the second handshake. Is that her? The one from the gossip column. Did you see the dress? It is not even designer. What is he thinking? Mira heard them all. She kept her chin up and her expression composed. She had learned long ago that the opinions of people who did not know you were not worth the energy of a response. Dominic's hand tightened on her arm. A question. A check-in. She squeezed back. I am fine. They made it through the receiving line. They accepted champagne from white-gloved servers. They navigated the conversations with the ease of two people who had rehearsed this moment, without ever discussing it. And across the room, Teddy Blackwood watched. The first hour passed in a blur of handshakes and pleasantries. Dominic introduced Mira to board members and investors and politicians, whose names she forgot as soon as she heard them. They all looked at her the same way, assessing, calculating, trying to determine what she wanted and how much it would cost. None of them understood. She wanted nothing from any of them. That was what made her dangerous. Dinner was served at 8. The tables were arranged in a horseshoe around a central stage where Teddy Blackwood would deliver the anniversary toast. Dominic and Mira were seated at the head table, directly in front of the podium, in the line of fire. The food was exquisite and tasteless. Mira pushed it around her plate, while Dominic made small talk with the senator's wife, seated to his left. She could feel eyes on her from every direction, could hear the whispers she was not supposed to hear. She looks nervous. She should be nervous. This is not her world. Give it 6 months. He will get bored and find someone appropriate. Mira set down her fork. Dominic noticed. Are you all right? She forced a smile. Just wondering when the toast will be over so we can leave. He took her hand under the table. Soon. I promise. The lights dimmed. The string quartet fell silent. And Theodore Blackwood took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. His voice was warm, paternal, the voice of a man who had spent decades perfecting the art of sounding trustworthy while calculating the best angle of attack. 25 years ago, I had the privilege of meeting a young scientist with a vision that would change the pharmaceutical industry forever. He raised his glass toward Dominic. That young man has become one of the great innovators of our time. He has weathered challenges that would have destroyed lesser men, and he continues to surprise us all with his innovative approaches to healing. He paused. The pause was just long enough, just pointed enough. Innovative approaches. Laughter rippled through the room, nervous at first, then knowing. I want to welcome all of our foundation scholars here tonight. The best and brightest from backgrounds we rarely see in rooms like this. Young people who remind us why we do this work. His eyes found Mira, especially our scholarship recipients who have taken such a personal interest in the company's leadership. More laughter. Louder. Now. Crueler. Mira's face burned. She could feel the heat rising from her chest to her cheeks. Could feel every eye in the room fixed on her with a mixture of amusement and contempt. So please, raise your glasses with me to Viridian Therapeutics, to 25 years of innovation, and to new beginnings and unconventional therapies. The room drank. Dominic did not. His champagne flute had cracked in his grip. Blood was seeping from a cut on his palm, dripping onto the white tablecloth in small crimson circles. Mira reached for his hand. Dominic, you are bleeding. He did not respond. His eyes were fixed on Teddy, and there was something in them she had not seen before. Not the broken man who collapsed on kitchen floors. Not the hollow executive who performed for cameras. Something harder. Something that looked almost like clarity. I need air. He stood before she could stop him, walked toward the side corridor without looking back. Mira started to follow. A hand closed on her arm. She turned. Teddy Blackwood was standing beside her table, his smile firmly in place. Miss Castellano, we have not been properly introduced. His grip was firm. Too firm. I know who you are, Mr. Blackwood. Do you? I wonder if you know everything. She pulled her arm free. Excuse me. She did not wait for a response. She walked toward the corridor, where Dominic had disappeared, weaving between tables. Ignoring the whispers that followed her like shadows, she found him behind a marble pillar. His back was against the cold stone. Dominic, I cannot do this. Yes, you can. He shook his head. I thought I could. I thought I was ready. But standing there, listening to him, knowing what he was doing and why he was doing it, I cannot breathe. I cannot think. I cannot. His voice broke. I am not the man they need me to be. I am not the man you need me to be. I am nothing. I am less than nothing. I am. She took his face in her hands. Listen to me. His eyes focused on her. You are not nothing. You are the man who sat on a kitchen floor, and let me tell you about my father. You are the man who came to New Bedford and let Jorge crush your hand because you knew you deserved it. You are the man who looks at me like I matter even when I have given you every reason to push me away. Tears were streaming down his face. You matter, Dominic. Not because of your money. Not because of your company. Because of who you are when you stop pretending. He closed his eyes. I do not know how to stop pretending. Then we will figure it out together. She leaned forward, pressed her forehead against his. Together. Remember, together. And then the lights went out. The darkness was absolute. One moment, 10,000 candles and crystal chandeliers had illuminated the most powerful people in Boston. The next moment, nothing. Not even the emergency lights. Not even the glow of exit signs. Just darkness and screaming. The crowd surged toward exits they could not see. Bodies collided in the darkness. Champagne glasses shattered on marble floors. Someone was crying. Someone was shouting for security. Someone was praying in a language Mira did not recognize. In the chaos, she lost him. One moment his hand was in hers, The next moment, he was gone. Dominic. She called his name, but her voice was swallowed by the panic. The emergency lighting flickered on, red and dim, casting everything in the color of blood and warning. She searched the corridor. The pillar where they had stood was empty. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring the hands that grabbed at her, the voices that demanded answers she did not have. And then she found him. He was on the floor behind another pillar, further from the main hall. His knees were drawn to his chest. His hands were clawed in his hair. His eyes were open but not seeing. The worst panic attack she had ever witnessed. Worse than the kitchen. Worse than anything. She dropped to her knees beside him. "Dominic, can you hear me?" No response. "I need you to focus on my voice. Just my voice. Nothing else matters right now." She took his hand. It was cold. Trembling. The cut on his palm was still bleeding. Around them, the chaos continued. People streaming past. Security guards with flashlights shouting directions. The wail of approaching sirens from somewhere outside. None of it mattered. She positioned herself so her body blocked him from view. So anyone passing would see only a woman in a burgundy dress, sitting against a pillar, perhaps overcome by the excitement. They would not see the most powerful man in Boston pharmaceuticals crumpled on the floor, unable to breathe. "Listen to me, Dominic. I am going to tell you about New Bedford in winter." Her voice was steady, calm. The voice she had used for her father in his worst moments. The harbor freezes in January. Not completely. The salt keeps the water moving, but ice forms along the edges. Crystals that catch the light when the sun comes up. My father used to take me to see it before school. We would stand on the pier and watch the ice glitter, and he would tell me that cold is just another kind of beauty. Dominic's breathing was still ragged, but something in his eyes shifted. The fishing boats go out anyway, even in the ice, even when the wind cuts through every layer you own, because the fish do not care about the weather, and the bills do not care about the cold. She squeezed his hand. My father lost 3 fingers to frostbite before I was born. He never complained about it. Said it just meant he had to work harder with the ones he had left. A sound escaped Dominic's throat. Not words, but something. He used to say that the cold teaches you what matters. When you are freezing, you do not think about money or status or what people think of you. You think about warmth, about the people waiting for you at home, about the things that are actually real. Dominic's breathing was slowing. "You are going to be okay. I am here. I am not leaving." She did not know how long they sat there. Minutes, maybe longer. His breathing normalized. His color returned. His eyes focused on her face. "Mira, I am here." "What happened?" "The power went out. Some kind of electrical failure. Everyone is being evacuated." He tried to sit up. She helped him. "How long was I?" "A few minutes, maybe 10. "Did anyone see?" "I do not think so. I kept you hidden." He looked at her. "You stayed." "Of course I stayed. You could have called for help. Could have let someone else handle it. Could have walked away from all of this." She shook her head. "You did not need someone else. You needed someone who would stay." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the lights came back on. Not the emergency lights, the real lights. 10,000 candles and crystal chandeliers blazing back to life, as if nothing had happened. And with the lights came the cameras. The photographer was positioned exactly where he needed to be. Later, when everything unraveled, the investigation would reveal that he had received an anonymous tip, specific instructions about where to stand, a guarantee that something newsworthy would happen. He had been waiting in that corridor for 20 minutes before the blackout. When the lights returned, he was ready. The image he captured would define the next month of their lives. Dominic Ashford, still gray-faced, leaning against Mira Castellano. Her arms wrapped around him protectively, her dress disheveled from kneeling on marble, his hand clutching hers like a lifeline. The flash was blinding. Then another flash, and another. Mira looked up, saw the photographer, saw the camera, understood, in that moment, exactly what had happened. "Get away from us." Her voice was sharp, commanding, nothing like the gentle tone she had used moments before. The photographer kept shooting. "This is harassment. This is private medical distress. If you publish those images..." The photographer smiled, kept shooting. "Free press, sweetheart. Public figure. Public event." Security finally arrived, escorted the photographer away, but the damage was done. The images were already uploading. The headlines were already writing themselves. Billionaire's secret cure. CEO collapses in student lover's arms. The photograph went viral before they reached the hospital. Dominic had refused an ambulance, but Mira had insisted on a medical evaluation. They had slipped out through a service entrance, taken her car, driven to a private clinic where his physician was waiting. By the time Dr. Carr finished his examination, the photograph was everywhere. Cable news, social media, gossip sites, legitimate newspapers. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a theory. Everyone had something to say about the billionaire and the scholarship student. The comments were brutal. Gold digger, trophy companion, midlife crisis, personified. And those were the kind ones. Dominic watched the coverage from the clinic bed, his face expressionless. "I should release a statement." His lawyer, Nathaniel Cross, was already on the phone. "We are working on it." Denying the romantic implications. Emphasizing the fellowship program. Framing this as a medical episode. Nothing more. End quote. And Mira, Cross hesitated. The best thing she can do is disappear. No public appearances. No statements. Let the story die on its own. Mira, who had been standing by the window, turned. "I am not disappearing. Miss Castellano. With respect, your continued presence will only fuel the speculation. My disappearance will confirm it. If I vanish now, they will say I was paid off, silenced, that there was something to hide." Cross looked at Dominic. Dominic looked at Mira. "She is right." "Dominic. She is right, Nathaniel. If we act like we have something to hide, they will assume we do. The only way through this is forward." Cross shook his head. "The board will not see it that way. Then the board can discuss it with me directly." In his glass tower, Teddy Blackwood watched the coverage with a glass of scotch in his hand. The photograph was everywhere. The stock was plummeting. The board members were already calling, demanding action. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. He had waited 2 years for this moment. 2 years of patience. 2 years of slowly, carefully, methodically weakening the man he had once called his greatest investment. The supplements had done their work. The compounds he had recommended as stress remedies had exacerbated every symptom, amplified every weakness, eroded every defense, until Dominic Ashford was a shadow of the man who had built Viridian Therapeutics. And now the final piece was in place. He picked up his phone. "Call the emergency board meeting for Monday. I want the vote on the agenda." His assistant's voice was hesitant. "Sir, do you think that is wise? The optics of moving so quickly after." "The optics are exactly what I need them to be." Dominic collapsed in public. His stock is cratering. His judgment is compromised by his relationship with this scholarship student. The board has a fiduciary duty to act. He smiled. "Monday, 9 o'clock. Make sure everyone knows attendance is mandatory. But there was something Teddy Blackwood did not know. Something he had not anticipated. Dr. Constance Liu, the chief medical officer of Viridian Therapeutics, had been watching too. Not the photograph. Not the stock price. Not the gossip columns. She had been watching Dominic's medical records, and she had noticed something that did not make sense. The toxicology reports from his quarterly physicals showed trace compounds that should not have been there. Compounds that were consistent with chronic exposure to certain industrial chemicals. Compounds that, in sufficient concentration over sufficient time, could cause exactly the symptoms Dominic had been experiencing. Numbness in the extremities. Panic attacks. Emotional dysregulation. Autoimmune responses that no treatment seemed to fully address. She had begun her investigation quietly, carefully, following the trail of compounds back to their source. And what she found had changed everything. On Sunday evening, the night before the emergency board meeting, Dr. Liu called Mira. "I need to see you. Tonight. Alone." Mira hesitated. "What is this about?" "It is about Dominic. About what has been happening to him. About why." Dr. Liu's voice was strained. "I have found something. Something that changes everything. But I do not know if he is stable enough to hear it. I need to talk to you first." Mira arrived at Dr. Liu's apartment an hour later. The chief medical officer looked like she had not slept in days. Her usually immaculate appearance was disheveled. Her hands shook as she poured them both tea. "What did you find?" Dr. Liu set a folder on the table between them. For the past 18 months, Dominic has been suffering from what his doctors believed was an autoimmune response to chronic stress. The clinical trial. The guilt. The isolation. It all made sense as a psychological explanation, but it was not psychological. Not entirely. "Look at these." She spread toxicology reports across the table. "These are trace compounds found in Dominic's blood work over the past 2 years. In isolation, they would be unremarkable. Background noise from environmental exposure. But in this concentration, in this combination, over this period of time, Mira's medical training kicked in. She scanned the reports, recognized the compounds, understood their effects. These would cause neurological inflammation, anxiety, panic responses. They would mimic and exacerbate autoimmune symptoms. Exactly. But where are they coming from? Dr. Liu slid another document across the table. 2 years ago, Teddy Blackwood recommended that Dominic start taking a herbal supplement, a stress remedy from a boutique wellness company. Dominic has been taking it daily ever since. Mira stared at the document. The supplement was manufactured by a company called Serenity Naturals, a company whose ownership structure was buried beneath layers of shell corporations and offshore accounts. A company that, after months of investigation, Dr. Liu had traced back to Theodore Blackwood. He has been poisoning him. Slowly. Carefully. Just enough to weaken him without killing him. Just enough to make him seem unstable, unfit, incapable of leading. Dr. Liu's voice was bitter. Teddy has been waiting for the right moment to strike. The gala, the photograph, the public collapse. It was all orchestrated. The blackout was not an accident. The photographer knew exactly where to be. Mira felt sick. Why? Why would he do this? Power. Control. Dominic's conscience was costing the company money. His ethics were inconvenient. Teddy wanted him out, and he wanted to be the one to take over. What do we do? That is why I called you. Dr. Liu leaned forward. I have the evidence. The toxicology reports. The ownership documents. The shell company trails. It is enough to destroy Teddy and exonerate Dominic. Then we give it to the board. It is not that simple. Dr. Liu hesitated. Dominic is fragile. Tomorrow morning, the board is going to vote to remove him as chairman. If I present this evidence, Teddy will attack. He will claim it is fabricated. He will claim Dominic is paranoid, delusional, grasping at conspiracies to explain his own failures. And if Dominic breaks down in front of the board, then Teddy wins anyway. Even if the evidence is real, if Dominic cannot hold himself together, the board will remove him for his own good. So what are you suggesting? Dr. Liu was quiet for a long moment. I am suggesting we do not tell Dominic. Not yet. We let the board meeting proceed. We wait until we have an airtight case. We protect him from the truth until we can guarantee victory. Mira stared at her. You want me to lie to him? I want to protect him. By deciding what truths he deserves to know. By managing him for his own good. By treating him like a patient instead of a person. Mira stood. That is exactly what Teddy has been doing. Manipulating him, controlling him, deciding what he needs without giving him the choice. This is different. Is it? Dr. Liu did not answer. Mira gathered the documents. I am going to tell him, tonight. And if it breaks him, then I will be there to help him put the pieces back together. That is what you do for the people you love. You tell them the truth, and you stay. She was at the door when Dr. Liu spoke again. You love him. It was not a question. Mira turned. Yes, I love him, and I will not build that love on another lie. The brownstone was quiet when Mira arrived. Mrs. Brennan had gone home for the night. The grandfather clock ticked in the empty hallway. The only light came from the study, where Dominic sat alone, staring at the fire. He looked up when she entered. I was not expecting you tonight. I know. She crossed the room, sat beside him on the sofa. There is something I need to tell you. He searched her face. What is wrong? She took his hands in hers. I need you to listen to everything before you respond. Can you do that? He nodded. She told him. Everything. The toxicology reports. The compounds. The supplements. Teddy's secret ownership of Serenity Naturals. The years of slow poisoning. The orchestrated collapse at the gala. The photographer who knew exactly where to be. She told him that his mentor had been trying to destroy him for 2 years. She told him that his illness was not his fault. She told him that everything he had believed about himself, about his weakness, about his failure, was a lie. When she finished, the silence stretched. Dominic's face was unreadable. Then he spoke. You came here to hate me. His voice was quiet, thoughtful. Yes. Teddy raised me like a son, funded my dreams, built my company alongside me. Yes, and neither of you saw me clearly. You saw what you needed to see, what you were afraid to see. Mira waited. Dominic stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city he had spent his life trying to impress. I have spent 40 years performing for audiences who never existed. My father, my board, my shareholders. I have never once asked myself what I actually want. He turned to face her. Do you know what I want, Mira? She shook her head. I want to deserve you. I want to deserve this one real thing before I die. And I cannot do that by hiding. I cannot do that by letting other people fight my battles while I cower in the corner. What are you saying? I have to walk into that boardroom tomorrow and tell them everything. Not as a strategy. As the truth. As the man I actually am. Not the man I have been pretending to be. Dominic. She crossed to him, took his face in her hands. Are you sure? He covered her hands with his. You taught me that the truth is the only foundation worth building on. You told me the truth about your father when you could have kept it hidden forever. You chose honesty over protection. He turned his head, kissed her palm. Now it is my turn. The Viridian Therapeutics boardroom was silent. 12 people sat around the polished table, Teddy Blackwood at one end, flanked by lawyers. Dominic at the other end, alone. Dr. Constance Liu sat near the middle, a folder in front of her. Mira stood in the doorway, uninvited but present. Teddy's smile was confident as he called the meeting to order. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for convening on such short notice. The events of Saturday evening have raised serious concerns about Mr. Ashford's fitness to lead this company. His public collapse, the nature of his relationship with a scholarship recipient, the damage to our stock price and our reputation. He spread his hands in a gesture of regret. I do not make this motion lightly. I have known Dominic for over 20 years. I funded this company's first seed round. I have watched him build something remarkable. He paused. But I have also watched him deteriorate. The clinical trial tragedy broke something in him. His judgment has become erratic. His public appearances have been minimal. And now, this. He gestured to a screen where the photograph was displayed. This is not the image of a man fit to lead a $47 billion company. The board members shifted in their seats. I am calling for a vote of no confidence in Dominic Ashford as chairman of Viridian Therapeutics. If the motion passes, I will serve as interim CEO until a permanent replacement can be identified. He looked around the table. All those in favor. 7 hands rose. All those opposed. 4 hands. Dr. Liu among them. The motion passes 7-2. Dominic stood. Before we proceed, I have something to say. The room went quiet. You are right, Teddy. Something did break in me after the clinical trial. 17 people died because of a decision I approved. I have spent the last 18 months trying to live with that, trying to understand how I failed them, trying to become someone worthy of continuing their work. He looked around the table. I've also spent the last 18 months wondering why I could not get better, why the treatments did not work, why every time I started to recover, something pulled me back down. He pressed a button. The photograph on the screen was replaced by a document. Now I know why. The room was suddenly very still. This is a toxicology report completed by Dr. Liu's team. It shows trace compounds in my blood work that are consistent with chronic poisoning. Teddy's expression flickered. For the past 2 years, I have been taking a herbal supplement, a stress remedy recommended to me by someone I trusted. Someone in this room. He looked directly at Teddy. That supplement contains compounds that, in chronic doses, mimic and exacerbate autoimmune responses. Numbness, panic attacks, emotional dysregulation, all the symptoms that have made me appear unfit to lead. Teddy's face went pale. This is absurd. This is a desperate attempt to deflect from your own failures. Dr. Liu spoke for the first time. I have the ownership documents, the shell company trails, the toxicology analysis. It is all verified. She slid a folder across the table. Mr. Blackwood has been slowly poisoning our chairman for 2 years, exacerbating his condition, eroding his credibility, waiting for the moment to strike. Teddy stood abruptly. I will not sit here and listen to these accusations. Then let me add one more. Dominic's voice was steady. The power failure at the gala. The water main break that allegedly caused it. Investigators have found evidence that the break was not accidental. The timing was too precise. The photographer was too prepared. He looked at Teddy. You orchestrated my public collapse. You arranged for the photograph. You planned every detail of my humiliation. Teddy's lawyers were whispering urgently in his ear. This is defamation. This is... This is the truth. Dominic turned to face the full board. I am not here to fight for my chairmanship. I am here to tell you what happened. What has been happening for 2 years. While I thought I was losing my mind. He took a breath. But before we proceed with any votes, I have something else to say. Something I should have said a long time ago. The board waited. I apologize. The word hung in the air. Not for being poisoned. Not for being manipulated by someone I trusted. I apologize for the 17 patients who died in our clinical trial. I apologize for the pricing decisions that made medications like tremzaprine inaccessible to families who needed them. I apologize for every Mira Castellano who died because he could not afford the medicine we manufactured. His voice cracked slightly. I built this company to save lives. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that the lives I was saving had to include the ones I could not monetize. I have been a coward. I have been complicit. And I have been blind to the man sitting 3 seats away who has been killing me slowly for 2 years. Teddy's face was a mask of rage. You are pathetic. You were always weak. You needed me to build this company. You needed me to make the hard choices you could not stomach. He jabbed a finger at Dominic. And now you are throwing it all away for what? A scholarship student who sees you as a meal ticket. She came to hate you. Dominic. She admitted it. Everything she has given you is a lie. Dominic looked toward the doorway. Mira was there, watching, waiting. She came to me for answers. She stayed because she found a man worth staying for. He turned back to Teddy. The irony is that her hatred was more honest than your mentorship ever was. The vote proceeded. But it was no longer about removing Dominic Ashford. Dr. Liu stood. I move to remove Theodore Blackwood from the board of directors pending criminal investigation. Seconded. Marcus Webb's voice. The CFO who followed whichever way the wind blew. The wind had shifted. All in favor. 9 hands rose. All opposed. 2 hands. Teddy's last remaining allies. The motion passes. Theodore Blackwood is removed from the board, effective immediately. Teddy stood frozen for a moment. His face cycled through rage, disbelief, calculation, and finally, something that looked almost like fear. Then he turned and walked out without a word. His lawyers followed. His legacy stayed behind, crumbling. In the aftermath, the boardroom emptied slowly. Board members approached Dominic. Some offered handshakes. Some offered apologies. Some simply nodded and left, uncertain how to process what they had witnessed. Dr. Liu stayed until the end. The criminal investigation will take months, maybe years. But we have enough to ensure he never works in this industry again. Dominic nodded. Thank you, Constance, for believing, for investigating when no one else did. She smiled. Thank Mira. She is the one who pushed me to dig deeper. She refused to let your decline be written off as weakness. Dominic looked toward the doorway. Mira was still there, waiting. I will thank her properly, when I figure out how. Dr. Liu touched his arm. You already know how. You are just afraid to say it. She left. Dominic crossed the room to where Mira stood. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she broke the silence. That was the bravest thing I have ever seen. It was the truth. That is not bravery. That is just honesty. Sometimes they are the same thing. He reached for her hand. She gave it. I meant what I said. About you being worth staying for. She smiled. It was fragile. Uncertain. Beautiful. You said her hatred was more honest than his mentorship. But my hatred is gone, Dominic. It has been gone for months. What replaced it? She was quiet for a moment. I do not know if I have a word for it yet. But I know I am not ready for it to end. Neither am I. They stood in the empty boardroom, holding hands, watching the Charles River flow past the glass walls. The sun was setting. The day was ending. But something else was beginning. 3 months later, Dominic Ashford resigned as chairman of Viridian Therapeutics. The decision surprised no one who knew him. The decision surprised everyone who thought they did. He transferred his controlling shares to a newly formed patient advocacy trust, a trust whose mission was to provide medication assistance to patients facing the impossible arithmetic of American healthcare. The trust's flagship initiative was called the Mira Castellano Access Fund, named for a fisherman from New Bedford who died because he could not afford $2,400 a month. Mira learned about the fund on a Tuesday afternoon. She was in the middle of a clinical rotation when her phone buzzed, a news alert. Dominic Ashford announces major pharmaceutical access initiative. She stepped into a supply closet to read the article. By the time she finished, she was crying. She called him that evening. "You named it after my father." His voice was quiet. "I could not bring him back. I could not undo what happened. But I could make sure his name meant something. That his death meant something." She was silent for a long moment. "My mother saw the news. She has not stopped crying. I should call her. Apologize. For everything. You should come to New Bedford. See her in person. Is that an invitation?" "It is more than that." "What is it?" She took a breath. "It is me asking you to meet my family. Really meet them. Not as a wellness companion. Not as a scholarship recipient. As someone who matters to me." He was quiet. "Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything." He arrived in New Bedford on a Friday afternoon. The weather was cold. December had settled over the coast, with the kind of gray determination that New Englanders recognize and accept. The harbor was quiet. The fishing boats rocked gently at their moorings. Mira met him at the pier. She was wearing a heavy coat that had belonged to her father. The sleeves were too long. She had rolled them up. "You came." "I said I would." She looked at him. Really looked. He was different than the man she had met 8 months ago. Healthier. The gray had faded from his complexion. The tremor in his hands had stopped. But more than the physical changes, there was something in his eyes, a steadiness that had not been there before, a presence. "You look good." "I feel good. For the first time in years, I actually feel good." She took his hand. "Come on. My mother has been cooking since dawn." Rosa's bakery was warm and filled with the smell of cinnamon and sugar. Mira's cousins were there, her aunts and uncles. Jorge from the fish market. Neighbors she had known since childhood. They all stared when Dominic walked in. He stared back. Then Rosa emerged from the kitchen, wiping flour from her hands. "So, you are the one who named a fund after my husband." "Yes, ma'am." Rosa studied him for a long moment. "Manuel would have hated you." Dominic did not flinch. "I know." She nodded slowly. "He would have been wrong." She opened her arms. Dominic stepped into the embrace of a woman he had never met, whose husband had died because of a decision he had approved, whose daughter had come to hate him and stayed to love him. And for the first time in his adult life, he felt like he was home. 1 year later, the pier in New Bedford was quiet on a winter morning. The fishing boats rocked gently in the harbor. Ice crystals formed along the waterline, catching the early light. Seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries sharp in the cold air. Dominic stood at the end of the pier, holding a small container. Mira stood beside him. "Are you ready?" He looked at the container. Inside were ashes. Not human remains. Something else entirely. He had burned the contents of his Beacon Hill study. The awards, the magazine covers, the testimonials and certificates and trophies that had once defined his worth. He had reduced 20 years of performance to a handful of gray powder. And now he was going to let it go. I am ready. He opened the container, extended his arm over the water. The wind caught the ashes, carried them out across the harbor, scattered them among the ice crystals and the salt spray and the eternal patience of the Atlantic. The last material traces of the man he used to be. Gone. Mira took his hand. My father would have hated you. He smiled. I know. He would have been wrong. The tide carried the ashes out. The sun broke through the clouds. And two people who had come together through grief and deception and the strange alchemy of healing stood on a pier in New Bedford, watching the past dissolve into the sea. They were not married. They were not engaged. What they were was something rarer. Two people who saw each other clearly, who knew each other's wounds, who had chosen each other with full knowledge of everything that had come before. Dominic had resigned from Viridian. He was working now with the Patient Advocacy Trust, spending his days in meetings with legislators and insurance executives and hospital administrators, fighting for the changes he should have fought for decades ago. Mira had graduated from medical school with honors. She had chosen geriatric care and palliative medicine, the field where her father's suffering had begun and ended. She worked at a clinic in New Bedford now, treating fishermen and their families, patients who reminded her every day of what mattered. They lived between two worlds, her apartment near the clinic, weekends at his brownstone in Boston. Neither place fully home, both places fully theirs. What are you thinking? Mira's voice broke through his reverie. I was thinking about the first time we met. How you told me you wanted to understand how I could sleep at night. She smiled. I was not very subtle. You were exactly what I needed. Someone who would not pretend. Someone who would not perform. She leaned against his shoulder. I came to find a monster. I found a man. And now I found something I was not looking for. What is that? A future. One I never imagined. One I could not have planned. He turned to face her. I spent 40 years building an empire, accumulating money and power and influence, trying to fill a hole that nothing could fill. She waited. And then you walked into my study and asked me how I slept at night, and I realized the answer was that I did not. I had not slept, really slept, in years. And now I sleep. Not because I have forgotten, not because I have been forgiven, but because I am finally doing something that matters, building something that honors the people I failed instead of trying to forget them. She reached up, touched his face. That is redemption. Is it? She nodded. Redemption is not erasure. It is not pretending the past did not happen. It is taking everything you have done, everything you have failed to do, and using it to build something better, something worthy. He covered her hand with his. You taught me that. You taught yourself. I just refused to let you hide from it. They stood on the pier as the sun rose higher. The boats were beginning to stir. Fishermen preparing for another day on the water. Another day of cold and danger, and the endless work of bringing food to tables. Manuel's world. A world Dominic had never known existed. A world that had always been there, invisible, just beyond the glass walls of his empire. Come on. Mira tugged his hand. Where are we going? My mother is making breakfast, and she will be very upset if we are late. They walked back along the pier, past the boats and the nets and the men who worked with their hands, past the harbor where Manuel's ashes had scattered years ago, past the life she had lived before him and the life they were building together. Here is what I want you to take from this story. Redemption is not erasure. Dominic could not bring back the 17 patients who died in his clinical trial. He could not resurrect Manuel Castellano. He could not undo the pricing decisions that had put profit over people for decades. The past had happened. The harm had been done. But redemption was never about undoing. It was about building a future worthy of the scars you carry, taking the weight of your failures and using it to lift something else. The cure you cannot buy. Dominic Ashford had access to the best doctors in the world, the most advanced treatments, medications, and therapies that cost more than most people earn in a year. None of it healed him. What healed him was a woman from a fishing town who wanted nothing from him, who saw through his performance, who refused to pretend. Authentic connection, genuine presence, the willingness to be seen. That was the cure no money could purchase, the medicine no pharmacy could dispense. The power of being truly seen. Dominic had spent his life hiding behind his achievements, his wealth, his reputation, building walls that kept people out, while trapping him inside. Mira had her own walls, her grief, her anger, her determination to understand the man who had killed her father without ever meeting him. Their love began when each allowed the other to see past the surface, when they stopped performing and started being present. Vulnerability was not weakness. It was the precondition for everything that mattered. So here is my question for you. What truth are you carrying that is waiting to be told? What connection are you avoiding because it would require you to be seen? What version of yourself are you ready to finally meet? Dominic Ashford walked into a boardroom and told the truth. Not as strategy, as salvation. Mira Castellano came to hate a monster and found a man worth staying for. Together, they built something that neither of them expected, and both of them earned. That is the story of the CEO, whose secret cure was a poor student, until a wild night changed everything. And if there is one thing I want you to remember, it is this. The people who change your life rarely look like what you expected. Sometimes they look like enemies. Sometimes they look like charity cases. Sometimes they look like everything you were taught to avoid. But healing does not ask where you came from. It only asks if you are willing to stay. Thank you for spending this time with me at the Isle of Secrets. If this story touched your heart, do me a favor. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe, if you have not already, and leave a comment telling me which moment hit you the hardest. I read every single one. Was it Mira's confession about her father on the kitchen floor? Was it Dominic's apology in the boardroom? Was it the final scene on the pier? Let me know. This community means everything to me, and every story I tell is for you. I am from the Isle of Secrets. I will see you in the next one.